Hey there, it's Leslie at Leslie's Cookies and Treats, and I've got the sweetest pumpkins for you today. I don't know what it is about bows, but I'm following this trend and I'm absolutely loving it. And I actually have this cookie cutter STL file available on my website. So if you have a 3D printer and you want to make these cookies, you can get the file there. So I'm using a 15-second royal icing in a really pale pink, and I'm outlining and flooding in the different sections of this pumpkin. I'm not going to fill in any section that is right next to another section because I want to let it crust over and dry a little bit so that it has time to create separation so that we can definitely see the ridges in between each layer of icing here. So I usually use the same consistency icing for outlining and for flooding. So I like to use a little bit thicker of a flood icing. And then I always take my scribe and use that to settle the icing down and get it out to any of the points and make sure there aren't any air bubbles that could cause craters later. So I let it dry for about 15-20 minutes, and now I'm going back in and I'm going to flood in the areas that are next to the sections that I already did. So I'll just outline them and flood them in and then use my scribe to settle them down and get the icing out to the points. I know that scribing each section can be tedious, but it's what gives your cookie a really professional finish. It helps the icing dry perfectly smooth, and so I really recommend that you do that to every section. It also helps keep craters from forming because you can make sure that the icing goes all the way down to the cookie without any air gaps underneath that will then settle and cause a crater. Now, I'm using a stiff royal icing up here to make the stem of the pumpkin. I'm just doing several lines and crisscrossing them over each other. And now the pink parts of the pumpkin have dried, and I'm coming back in with a really light peachy color. I used Ivory by Americolor, the food gel, to make this creamy color. I'll put a link in the description, or at least a list of all the products I used. And I'm going to do the same thing for the tail of the bow on this other side. This pumpkin has a really large bow that's kind of dropping down and curling and resting on the ground. And then I'll set the pumpkin aside to dry again. And now that it's dried for about 15 minutes, I can go back in and do the bow loops. And then I'll set it aside to dry one more time. And again, I'm using my scribe to make sure that the icing gets down to the bottom of the cookie and that it's smooth and out to all of the points. And I overflowed a little bit, so I'm just going to wipe that away with my scribe. Now that that's had a chance to set up, I'll add the center of the bow, and I'll use my scribe in an up and down motion to make sure that it gets all the way down to the cookie. So then I let my cookie dry overnight, and I'm using some Americolor gel and some food grade glycerin to thin it down a little bit. And I'm just going to paint in the ridges of the cookie and then take my paintbrush and drag some of it out to create some shadows. So what I like to do is use a thin brush to outline everything, and then I'll take a dry flat brush and kind of use that to feather the color out and make it look like there's some shadows. I don't use an airbrush, so if I'm going to add shading to a cookie, this is how I do it. And I like thinning my food color down with the food grade glycerin rather than vodka or some kind of alcohol because it allows me more workable time with the color. And so I can put it down and smooth it out and blend it out. And if I put somewhere I don't like it, I could even get a dampened paintbrush and remove the color. And so here I'm just going to make some lines in a plaid pattern. First I'm going to use pink and then I'll go back in with the ivory. And I'm using the same colors that I used to actually make the icing for the pumpkin. So anyway, going back to using the food grade glycerin, again, it gives me more workable time. I can blend colors. I can erase colors if I put paint down and I don't like it. And I'm not a painter, so I struggle with this a bit. So I want some more workable time that I can have rather than having the vodka or some kind of alcohol or even the color solution, which is great when you want to put color down that you just want it to dry immediately. This will dry in about, probably an hour at the most. And depends how much you put on, but I really like how the process works and it gives it definitely more of an airbrushed feel. Anyway, you get the idea of my process, so I'm just going to speed through the rest of this. If you want a more detailed video of my painting process, just let me know in the comments. And you might be wondering how I learned how to do all of this. And actually, I learned it all through taking online classes and through watching YouTube videos. But I found that on YouTube, there wasn't a lot of videos that taught the more advanced techniques. And that's why I started this channel. And here's the finished pumpkin. I think these pumpkins with bows are absolutely adorable. Here's the whole set. And remember, the STLs are available on my website. And if you want to do a deeper dive and you want more Halloween cookies, I do have a class for Halloween. We'll make these cute gnomies. There's 5 different cookies, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can learn more. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. And hey, if there's something you'd like to have a tutorial on, let me know in the comments. Thanks.